Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here, and today I'm going to be talking about the second game of the three games played today in the Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis. And in this game we have MVL as if you don't know who that is, that's Maxime Vachier Lagrave. I will not say his name again in any of the future videos that I will be posting about this tournament. And Nakamura playing black. Without much introduction, I'll just start the game here. MVL plays e4 and e5 is played by Nakamura, and we reach a pretty standard Rui Lopez opening with very similar content to what I showed you yesterday. And let's see if I can recall correctly. Topalov versus Nakamura. Nakamura is playing black again today in the same position, and I think we get essentially the same line in this game with actually white playing d4 a little bit earlier rather than say a4 by MVL. Um, Yesterday played by Topalov, I mean. And in this game, we kind of get a very similar structure, except white plays an early bishop e3. And I guess one idea that black has to ponder is knight g4 in this kind of position, and in this certain kind of position, actually white can play bishop g5, gaining a tempo on the queen, and there's not really a good way to meet this move actually. Black would have to play like queen d7, and he really doesn't want to play f6 and kick away the white's bishop, because this bishop is just kind of a beast down this diagonal, and after bishop g5, probably knight e7. Although, probably h3 and pawn takes pawn is winning a pawn there. I don't know. It just looks super weird to meet a move like bishop g5. Probably don't want to allow that. And this kind of explains black's next move here. Actually, no, it doesn't. Black just continued castling, and both sides are just focused with their development. And still, black can't play knight g4 here because of the same idea with bishop g5. And this kind of explains black's next move, I mean, with h6, and now he really is playing knight g4 because bishop g5 is threatened. White does the same thing with h3, preventing knight g4, and even in bishop g4 move, trying to gain pressure on the center. And, each side just continues their development. Bishop b7 to attack this pawn and x-ray it on this diagonal. It looks very similar to yesterday's game. White continues with rook e1, planning to support the e4 pawn in the future, and black resolves the tension in the center. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. We've had the same structure as yesterday's game, and as I've already mentioned, very nice dual pawn center. But again, black played knight a5 in this game, bishop c2, rook e8, and has really nice pressure against the center with the two bishops, and probably a future knight c4 coming. And there's just really let's say hard to meet pressure here. White is kind of forced to defend for the moment, and kind of has to react to black's moves. Let's say tempo gaining moves in a sense, or let's say forcing moves by black. And in this position, there's kind of a lot of pressure on e4, and white decided to defend the pawn with queen b1. Kind of unusual, but it kind of makes sense, right? And black decided to. I mean, black in this position can play quite a few moves, but I think in the move played by Nakamura is a really good one with knight c4. Trying to, let's say, remove a defender here, and white didn't really see anything better because the bishop's hanging. Than just chopping off the knight off, and after pawn takes knight here, this pawn is still under threat, so white moves the other knight back here to help defend the pawn, also attack this pawn, and Nakamura in this position played rook b8, kind of x-raying the queen along this file. And I mean, it's really tough for white to make any progress. He can play f3 in this kind of position, but you've already weakened the g3 square with a move such as h3, and you can already think about a move such as d5, and after e5, knight d7. At first you might think this diagonal is great, but black is coming with c5, trying to destroy your center, and I don't think this is really what white wants. He wants, especially after or just ignore what I just said. F3 just kind of weakens the structure. I don't think white really wants to play that, and he just ended up playing knight takes c4, and we ended up getting a big simplification of the position with bishop takes pawn here, and with kind of this pawn trade we saw for e4 for c4, and one big trade, and white ended up playing queen d3, centralizing the queen and connecting the rooks. I mean, he can always take b6 anytime he wants, but he doesn't want to take it immediately because rook takes b6 comes with tempo on the b pawn. So probably, this move kind of makes a lot of sense. Just kind of centralizing the queen, as I mentioned. Black played queen e8, and probably he can activate the queen via these squares, trying to get opposing this queen if it goes to b5, and also kind of keeps this file under watch. Let's say white can't just move the the bishop in any special direction. He has to. I mean, he could play bishop d2, but after, I guess, he doesn't really need to take anyone. But d4 is always under pressure. Knight d5 is a move that you can think of, and if the bishop moves, that you always have strong pressure on the b file. Black is completely okay in this kind of position, and after a few more moves, f3, as I already mentioned, is kind of weakening the squares, but white has to get rid of this rook somehow, and black backed up the rook. Move the bishop here to again get out of the file, and let's say just make sure he can take on e1, followed by another rook coming to e1. Knight d5 played by black, and he centralizes the knight behind in front of this isolated pawn, and this is just a beautiful blockading piece. And I actually slightly prefer black, but it's nothing at all for black, and really black can't really make use of the advantage that he has in, let's say, in his piece play here. And in this position, instead of moving the queen, he decided to play knight f4, relying on that rook takes e6 is met by knight d3, and knight takes f2 is already a serious threat when this d pawn is under huge pressure. Probably the position is what? Probably not good for white at all, and the rook has to move. Knight takes f2, and d4 drops. Obviously, that's not good for white. I wonder if knight takes b6 is worthy of consideration. Probably knight takes h3. You can throw that in and just take this with extra pawn for black. So in the end, instead of this all this stuff, white just dropped the queen back, and black centralized let's say the queen on the square that the knight wanted to go do. But in this concrete case, you can always think about queen g5, positioning the queen in a more ideal spot, and also you're just blockading the pawn. You're applying more pressure with the queen and bishop here, and I mean, black doesn't really have any problems. In the game, white just ended up defending the pawn here on d4 and simultaneously attacking the knight here on f4. And this position is pretty balanced. I think white, despite having this weakness, has some pretty good pieces, active pieces on the board, and you can always rely on your activity. Probably a solid move with b3 supporting the knight, followed by, let's say, queen d2 attacking this knight further. And white's doing certainly okay, but black has really no problems, I think. And after, let's say, knight e6, bringing the knight back and trying to apply more pressure, white played queen c3, supporting the d pawn. Black played c5, trying to, let's say, liquidate one of his last pawns and kind of getting a lot of activity, opening up the position as well. One of these two files, I think the c file is going to open up if black takes on d4, and black can rely on the open c file here. And this game really ended quickly. Unfortunately, I mean, there wasn't really much fireworks in this game, and white ended up just taking the bishop here on b6, and after rook takes b6, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, b3, solidly defending against the c pawn push at some point. Rook d6, black gains a good control of the d file, and in this position they agreed to a draw. Very surprising and early draw, but you could play this position on, by the way. I wouldn't mind playing either color, really. Although black has this weak isolated pawn, he has a really, really nice knight here that can go to d4 at some point, and clearly the knight is pretty good, just as the bishop is. White's rook doesn't have much activity. Maybe it can go to a4, but black always has activity here in the d file. Queen d2 is always an idea to try to get counterplay against the a2 pawn, and black really is not in trouble at all. He's holding his own quite easily in this position. Well, anyways, guys, that's probably pretty much another uneventful game from today. Carlsen's game was a bit longer, but that game started equal and ended equal. This game pretty much the same. I guess they all wanted kind of a rest day after the insane tactical complications, as I mentioned earlier. That's just kind of my thoughts. I don't know what. Maybe you'll see something in the press conference indicating otherwise, but the press conference that they had today after the game ending, maybe there's something that'll be mentioned, but otherwise, I'll be talking about Caruana and Ronian, and that's probably the much more exciting game in retrospect. And after looking at all these games, that's by far the most interesting game in the round. Anyways, guys, I'll be covering that game soon. This is Infinite Flash signing out.